During the Artemis II mission, 4 astronauts didn't just lose radio contact behind the moon for 40 minutes. They experienced a localized consciousness shift and reported seeing the physical boundaries of a constructed reality. NASA immediately buried the debriefing files, but they made a catastrophic mistake in the data they left behind, and by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why the official space narrative is crumbling. If you've ever looked at those official space photos and felt in your gut that something is deeply mathematically wrong with them, sit down, we need to talk.
Hold on, are you saying what I think you're saying? I hit a literal wall in space.
Let's back up to the launch. NASA decided to push this massive PR campaign and release mission updates right around April Fool's Day. It sounds bizarre, almost like we're the joke, but it's actually a documented psychological tactic, extending the joke, hiding the truth in plain sight so anyone who questions the anomalies looks ridiculous. When the Artemis II crew crossed into the shadow of the moon, communications went completely dead. We're told it's just orbital mechanics, standard radio blockage. But the astronauts didn't just experience empty space in the dark, they experienced a profound shift.
A shift, like psychological or physical?
Both, and NASA knew the telemetry leak was coming. Their immediate panic response was to flood the internet with high-definition photos of Earth to distract the public. Up until recently, NASA freely admitted most Earth shots were composites, dozens of images stitched together with clouds added in later. But for this mission, they claimed they had a real, perfect, single shot of a dark Earth. But here is the thing. Embedded deep in the original file of that very first Artemis Earth shot is a highly classified piece of EXIF data, a digital fingerprint that absolutely destroys the official story. I'm going to show you exactly what that data translates to in just a minute. But first, you need to see the impossible mistake they made with the clouds. They released 2 massive high-res photos of the Earth from this mission, supposedly taken 12 hours apart. But when an independent analyst overlapped them, you realize someone in the editing room made a fatal error. The first photo was a beautiful night shot. 12 hours later, they dropped a daytime shot of the exact same hemisphere. But if you blink between the 2 images, not a single cloud is moved. 12 hours of global weather, wind, and atmospheric pressure, and the clouds are in the exact identical pixel-perfect position. You're telling me the entire Earth's atmosphere just froze in place for half a day?
Wait, seriously? Nobody noticed that the weather was literally copy-pasted.
A few did. A camera expert analyzed the daytime shot, the one where the sun is supposedly backlighting the Earth. If the sun is behind them, the front of the Earth facing the camera should be entirely in shadow, lacking detail. But we see perfect, crisp continent details because the metadata revealed the ISO was cranked up to 51,000. That's not a space photograph. That's a hyperexposed composite taken in a dark room with a localized light source bouncing off the walls. They were artificially manipulating the timeline of the mission.
So what happens when people point this out? Do they just ignore it?
No, they panicked. This camera nerd took his findings to D-Peer Review, a massive photography forum. He pointed out the 51,000 ISO anomaly, the fact that the continent sizes didn't even match previous photos, and how the Earth didn't even look perfectly spherical in their composite. It was a polite, highly analytical post. He logged out, came back an hour later, and his post was completely scrubbed from the internet.
Just deleted? No explanation?
Erased, and it wasn't standard forum moderation. It was a targeted wipe. They couldn't afford anyone looking too closely at the timeline because right before the communication blackout, the NASA control room initiated their standard T- countdown protocol. But there's a chilling hidden reason they use the specific phrase T-, and it connects to an ancient esoteric practice that we will decode shortly. Before we get to that dark history though, we need to talk about the hacker who downloaded the original Earth image file and checked its digital shutter count. He bypassed the scrubbed forums and ran the image's core data through an encryption decoder, and the message that spit out wasn't a set of numbers, it was a direct threat. When you take a picture with a digital camera, it logs a shutter count, exactly how many photos that specific camera has ever taken. The camera expert downloaded the original file of that bright, manipulated Earth shot and checked the count. The number was exactly 5,565.
55? 65? Does that mean something specific, or is it just a random data point?
In standard photography, it's just a number. But remember how I mentioned that classified piece of EXIF data they accidentally left in? The whistleblower didn't just find a number. They knew NASA's internal communication protocols often rely on gematria and alphanumeric code system where numbers correspond to hidden phrases. When the shutter count 5,565 was run through the database, it didn't translate to technical jargon. It translated to exact, coherent English sentences.
No way. What did it say?
The first phrase it pulled up was, "Don't trust the devil ever, 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 ever."
You're kidding me. In official space agency image data?
I wish I was. But the second phrase is the one that proves the 40-minute blackout was a cover-up. The data read, "When the truth is given, it is usually feared and avoided because it requires man change." The EXIF data wasn't an accident. It was a cry for help from a whistleblower inside the agency. They intentionally logged that specific shutter count to flag the image as a digital forgery. They wanted us to know the photos were faked because the real footage of what the astronauts saw during those 40 minutes would fundamentally break human society.
So they faked the images to hide what was actually behind the moon. But how long have they been doing this?
That's the real question. It will take years for the public to forgive the institutions involved for the sheer scale of this deception. We are looking at decades of breadcrumbs. To understand what the crew actually hid in the dark, you have to look at the leaked footage of astronauts from previous missions and the impossible physical glitch caught on camera that proves we've been lied to from day one. To understand why the agency would go to such extreme lengths to fake these specific images, you have to look at the history of the age of deception. We are not just talking about manipulated pixels here. There is a documented historical pattern of whistleblowers exposing massive physical inconsistencies. We've seen leaked, raw footage from past missions where astronauts are visibly hanging from harnesses, swaying unnaturally while claiming to be in zero gravity. We've seen videos of other crew members accidentally grabbing invisible wires on live broadcasts. The physics simply do not add up. They have been engineering these scientific proofs for decades to keep the public entirely docile.
Okay, I have to say, if you're watching this and you've never heard this before, you need to share this. Like, people need to know. Because the scale of the gaslighting is just insane.
That's exactly why we do this. They calculate everything, right down to the supposed curvature of the bridges we build, feeding us formulas to ensure we never question the shape or the boundaries of where we live. But the visual tricks and the fake anti-gravity harnesses are just the surface-level deception. The real darkness of the space agency isn't found in their cameras or their green screens. It's written in the ink on their skin, and in the specific chilling words they chant right before a rocket leaves the ground. A few years ago, suppressed footage surfaced showing a high-level agency handler assisting an astronaut. When the handler's sleeve rolled up, his arm was covered in deeply esoteric, inverted tattoo symbols directly linked to dark occult practices. It wasn't just a personal choice. It was a mark of initiation, and this ties directly into the launch protocols. Every time a rocket is about to launch, the control room strictly adheres to the T-minus countdown. T-minus 10, 9, 8.
Yeah, they always say that. But what does the T actually stand for? I thought it just meant time.
That's what they want the public to think. But if you analyze the linguistic roots of their internal naming conventions, it's an esoteric ritual. In ancient mysticism, the T represents the physical cross, the material boundary of our world. To say T- is to vocally command the removal of the material boundary. And if you run the agency's own acronym, NASA, it's through their specific anagram protocols and minus the T, you are left with an archaic invocation that translates to an inverted dark oath. They aren't just launching a ship, they're performing an occult initiation right before they cross into the dark side of the moon.
Wait, an initiation for what? Are they communicating with something out there?
Not communicating, waking something up. Which brings us to the Egyptian Pact. There is a highly suppressed theory that our ancient ancestors forged a treaty thousands of years ago with an entity that resides in the shadow of the moon. But to understand the terrifying nature of that pact, we have to look at what exactly happened during those 40 minutes of radio silence. When the Artemis II crew crossed that threshold and the telemetry went dead, they didn't just lose signal. They hit the absolute physical limit of the human cage. The astronauts didn't float into an infinite empty void. They collided with a localized frequency barrier. Whistleblowers who have analyzed the suppressed mission, telemetry refer to it cryptically as the dog dome, which is the word God inverted. It is a synthetic plasma-based boundary that completely surrounds our localized system. And this is what triggered the profound consciousness shift the 4 astronauts reported. It wasn't spiritual enlightenment. It was the pure, traumatic terror of realizing that the 3D physical universe we've been taught is actually a closed, constructed quarantine zone.
Hold on, so space isn't an infinite vacuum? We are literally inside an enclosure?
Exactly. They looked out the window and realized they weren't explorers. They were subjects inside an unimaginably vast terrarium. They saw the grid. The Earth they were looking back at was shrouded by this boundary. They quickly realized they couldn't land on the moon because you cannot land a physical spacecraft on a highly charged plasma frequency barrier. They were forced to curve their trajectory and come back down.
That is terrifying. But if the agency already knew this barrier was there, why would they even send them up in the first place?
Because the goal of Artemis II was never exploration. The goal was to deliberately touch the boundary. By breaching that frequency, the crew broke the quarantine. And what they activated in the process is going to make you wish the sky was actually empty. Thousands of years ago, our ancient ancestors, the true architects of the Egyptian civilization, encountered the entities guarding that boundary. They made a definitive pact. Humanity would remain in the enclosure, and we would never return to the dark side of the moon. But the leaders of the New World Order don't want to honor that pact anymore. They sent Artemis to deliberately breach the treaty, intentionally angering whatever is waiting on the other side.
But why? What do they gain by starting a war with something that built the cage?
Control, because the retaliation won't be a physical attack, it will be a global psychological operation. Whistleblowers warn that the agency is preparing to use that plasma boundary as a massive canvas. They are going to project a fabricated, holographic alien invasion into our sky. A threat so terrifying and universally visible that it will force every single nation to immediately surrender their sovereignty and band together under one unified global government.
So, the entire space program, the fake photos, all of it, it's just the setup for the ultimate false flag?
Exactly. Remember what I said at the very beginning, how they made a catastrophic mistake in their data? They didn't just leave behind proof of a photoshopped Earth, they left behind the smoking gun that the sky itself is a screen. The ancient texts didn't call them gods, they called them engineers. And now you know exactly what they were building and the terrifying illusion they are about to turn on.
But wait, if the sky is just a massive projection screen and they've been testing holograms, and what does that mean for the Phoenix Lights incident? Because I looked it up and the military's explanation of flares makes zero sense now.
That is a whole other rabbit hole next time.